will call our budget work session to order. And I will turn it over to Dr. Robertson for the budget presentation.
Thanks, Chairman McClendon. We're going to go through a quick presentation that gives a pretty high-level overview of where we are in terms of revenue, plans for priority-based budget, and some other aspects. Before we get started, we have provided budget workbook that goes into great detail for the budget, so that's for you to continue to review over the next couple weeks. And of course, we have individual meetings set with, I think, everybody by the end of this week, so we can get into much more detail about the budget in those conversations, and you've got it all here. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stewart to get us started, and we'll take some questions at the end if you have them.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. We are excited to present our thinking around the budget, and as we say over and over again, right? A budget is it's an assessment of our values, right? It's a values-based document, and so we really approach that this way. So this first few slides are things you guys have seen, so you know where we are on the timeline. We have done a lot to get feedback and to understand the community's priorities. We've listened. We've given them a state of where we are as a system. As we've gone through this budget priority, you guys are well aware of the fact that there are lots of voices, even down to the student level, that have influenced some of the decisions that we have made. Again, to ground us in our priorities that all children thrive and experience a future without limits, you will see that demonstrated in how we're choosing to spend our money. Also, just to remind us, we are aligned to the 5 priorities of the Future Ready 2023 plan. Again, you guys are very familiar with this, but we're hoping that as we go through, you will see that continual alignment. And this next slide, again, is something that you've seen and I've talked about, where what you see on this slide are the things that came out of those community priorities, and again, things that you will see in the budget. But again, looking in that first one, I'm looking at a lot of the supports we're needing to provide for some of our student groups. And in that second one, I'm thinking a lot about that middle school transition that we've mentioned, and some of those choice options, the teacher support and providing increased compensation coming out of that middle column, our commitment to engage community and making sure that we're listening well to the community and the priorities that they've articulated. And then again, the efficient and effective operations, looking there at our facilities and the way we're taking care of our resources. This slide is new to you, and so what we wanted to kind of visualize here for you is that while we think about our budget, a priority budget really puts the district priorities at the middle, right? It's our priorities that drive how we spend our money, not the funding source. And so this is just intended to kind of remind us all that money comes to us through different sources, right? You've got the local and the state dollars that are coming in, and they're funding some of our resources, and they provide our general purpose budget. But then on the right side there, you see that we do have a series of grants, and those grants vary based on priority and all sorts of other things, but they come in and they also are aligned to our priorities there in that strategic plan coming down the middle. We did create on that right side sort of some gradation in those colors to really indicate that those grant sources and those funding sources kind of go up and down, they kind of come in and out, but they're always focused on what our central priorities are, and our responsibility is to strategically utilize them for those central priorities. So as we came into this process, we thought a lot about this concept of braiding and blending, and I know those are terms we use here pretty frequently, but wanted to just highlight what we mean by them, right? That as a school district, we're committed to looking at all of the funding sources and to braid and blend them effectively to utilize all the resources that we have in service of what our kids need, and to also, in this particular time and day, when we know TISA is just around the corner, we want to be even more intentional about looking at where the current funding, where's the funding that's coming on the horizon, what's the funding that's going away, to make sure we're doing that well. We think this visual really shows an example of how we've done that, right? In FY21, the nurses were funded out of the general purpose budget. And then in 22, we had an influx of grant budgets based on the pandemic, so we moved those there, and we are committed to maintaining that nurse in every single school, and so we've pulled them into the GP budget. So that's just an example of one way that we have done this braiding and blending. Here's the 3 commitments that we, as a team with a new superintendent and a new group, we really had to calibrate. What are we really trying to do? What are we committed to do in this budget process? And I would say these are the 3 large strands that we landed on. The first thing there is clarity and transparency, right? We want you guys to be very clear, not just you, but the public to be very clear about how our budget is allocated and spent and the rationale behind those decisions, all in service of the needs of our kids. And that second part there is that we really have gotten better and better as a district with the systems that support the accuracy of reporting, and you'll hear some of that here tonight. So clarity and transparency in that space. The middle column there around the strategic use of funds, again, I feel like we were saying this with redundancy, but that we would be effective, right, with utilizing all the funding sources to align them to our needs, and that we would do that braiding and blending that we've talked about. And then finally, we know you'll hold us accountable to making sure that it's aligned to the priorities that we have articulated in the Future Ready Plan and the priorities that our community has indicated. The key takeaways are these. As you go through today and as you hear kind of where we are in our budget, these are the 3 big buckets of ideas, or the key takeaways. 1, it will demonstrate our investment in our people. 2, you'll see a clear investment in our priorities. And 3, the budget is balanced. And so those are the key takeaways as we get into tonight.
Well, thank you. So this schedule we did share at a previous meeting, but we've made some revisions. So the previous meeting, we were looking at about a 2% overall increase in revenue, and we bumped that up to 3%. So I've talked to the county, verified these numbers. The biggest change really was in sales tax. In the previous number, we were kind of basing the increase on the 22 budget for sales tax, and we went back and adjusted it to really reflect which we actually received in 21, which was around 95 million. So that was the majority of the increase there. The county was recognizing their revenue, so they were going to estimate their sales tax revenue based on what they received. They expected that to continue, so we aligned our budget projections with them, and then went back through the BEP projections in the governor's bill and looked at that and did some recalculation there. So went back and gave what we feel is still a conservative revenue estimate, but we feel like this more accurately reflects the revenue that we'll expect next year. And then, as Dr. Stewart said, we are presenting a balanced budget to you. And so this is just the reconciliation we've shared in the past, kind of just walking through.
Can we turn you up just a little bit? I can just barely. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. So this reconciliation takes it from the fiscal year 22 adopted budget, and it shows the adjustments we've made this year so far. And the main thing are in our state GP. We haven't actually made a revenue change on the GP budget, but we did ask for those use of fund balance, with the 2 major items being covering the HVAC at CCA, and then $5 million set aside for the textbooks. And then you can see we kind of back out those one-time adjustments to get to kind of a starting base. And then these are the highlights of the main items that we are presenting in the budget. And again, there's a lot more detail on these, but the biggest takeaways are the step increase and a 2% salary increase. And then our contractual obligations. You'll see another big number is the charter school increase, so they're continuing to see enrollment increases. Plus, when our revenue increases, that increases the allocation to them. And then, Yep, and then another thing that we're very excited to present is taking the classified up to $15. And also, when we're doing that, also dealing with the compression issue that happens when we bump those up. So it includes both of those components. So I know that was an important thing to all of us too. So we are glad we were able to present that in this budget. And then wanted to point out a new presentation. So you'll see the very last line is vacancy savings. So what we do is we project all positions that we have on the books, and we show them fully funded. We book that so we know it doesn't happen, but we say, well, if they were all funded, this is what it costs. So it's important to know that. And then this is a common business budget practice, is to say, here's how much capture we expect from vacancy savings. It's about 3%, and that's generally, we've run that or more, especially right now with some of our staffing challenges. It's probably more aggressive than that. So this is still a conservative number, but we feel like that's a good utilization. And we, again, tying to the transparency, going and showing here's what the full salaries with all positions budgeted, but then we expect this vacancy savings. then I'll turn it over to Dr. Robertson.
So when we look at position reconciliation, this goes back to the slide that Dr. Stewart was presenting, talking about being very clear and very transparent with where we are with this budget. And one of the things we've been working towards with Munis is to have very transparent processes with our position control. So to know exactly who is in what seat and where they are, and to make sure that those seats actually reflect the work that you're doing. And so this is a reconciliation of what was presented in last year's budget and then what is actually there. So when you look at these cleaned up lines, you're going to see an adjustment of 18.4 positions. So the budget that was presented last year had 4,598 positions. When we've gone through and done the cleanup using Munis and getting people in the right seats, what we find is actually there are 4,616 positions and 4/10 of a position. I'm not sure what that is, but it's there. The point of this, though, is for us to be very transparent with what we have and what they're doing. So an example of this, when we look at what has been previously coded sometimes under school support, actually was not as close to school support as it was district support. So for example, we have 8 IT specialists that were previously coded under that school support line, but in reality, they're really doing more district support. Does that make sense? And so we've made some changes here to reset a baseline of where we are with our staffing. What we're hoping to do is that moving forward, that 4,616 is our baseline, and anything up or down are things that we're coming to you and saying, if we want to add a position, we're requesting it and it will add to that number. And we can be very clear in terms of, you know, what is a school support position? What is a school leadership position? I know one of the things that the community wants to hear from us is how many of our positions and what percentage of our positions are actually in schools supporting schools compared to what is at district office. Does that make sense? And so we're trying to do this in a very clear and transparent manner. So positions and funding, and this gets to the strategic use of funds and that blending and braiding that Dr. Stewart mentioned previously. So we're going to have some transfer between relief funds and GP, and those are noted here. So going from a GP to relief funds, we're going to move 8 positions, and those consist of parent volunteer coordinators and behavior specialists. The reason that we're doing this is because these are positions that, to be quite honest, we feel like we need to continue to evaluate and to make sure that we want to include them in our GP budget. They're also not supported clearly in TISA, okay? And so we're taking these from GP, moving them to relief funds. On the other side, we're taking 25.4 positions from relief funds and putting those in GP. These consist of counselors, the majority is counselors and nurses, but we do have a bus video coordinator, 2, I think, tech integration coaches, and 3 or 4 instructional coaches, and those are all listed in your very detailed book there. The reason we feel like it's important to move these from relief funds to GP is that you know counselors and nurses are very clearly funded in the base in TISA. We also are committed to having counselors and nurses in each and every one of our buildings. It's very difficult to hire nurses right now. It's very difficult to hire counselors. And when we go and try to recruit and we tell them that this is a grant-funded position, that's less competitive than saying this is in our GP budget. Also feel like each and every one of these positions align well with our priorities. We do have some new state funded positions. These are positions that are in state grants. So we have some early childhood positions for pre-K, and then we have 2 positions in school safety. Remember, these were the positions that in our school safety grant that used to fund some SROs, and we've shifted that into funding SSOs. This budget clearly indicates that, and so we're pointing these out again for transparency's sakes. In the budget, there are 25 and a half requested new positions. These would be new, not only to us as a district, but new to any funding source that we've had. And we're asking those to be funded in GP. And those examples are 10 ESL positions. Those are positions that we need to be in compliance with our growing English language learners population. And so we're asking for 10 positions in ESL. We've committed to the construction center at Garber. That's 2 teacher positions and a coordinator position. So those are reflected in this. We have assistant principals that through the staffing model, schools have earned either a assistant principal or an additional assistant principal. A couple of them are in places where they had not previously had an assistant principal. I think one is, like an example would be Alpine Crest. They've gotten to a point over 300 students now where they've gained an AP. Of course, we have 2 new board members that will start in September, so those are reflected in this, and then there's some requests for central office support. An example of this, and the details are in here, but we have had 1 position at central office recently that's done discipline and also our district athletic director. We're asking to split that, and so we're asking you to fund a full-time district athletic director, okay? And again, the specifics of those are in here, but that's a general overview of the number and the position types that are there. In terms of funding our priorities, we broke this up and went into detail about what we're asking to be funded in this proposed budget, and it again lines to each of the goals in Future Ready 2023. So under accelerating student achievement, we have the positions that we've already mentioned. I'll highlight just the 10 additional teachers for English language learners, and then the 18.9 that are existing in SEED that we're going to move from ESSER to GP. Again, those are the the examples of the nurses and the counselors. In Future Ready students, Construction Workforce Center at Garber, there's the 2 additional CTE teachers, and then the coordinator position that we spoke about last week, and you saw in the news that Gerald Harris is going to fill that position if it is approved. And then in Great Teachers and Great Leaders, we did add 6 school-based assistant principals based off the staffing model. There's a 2% increase and a step increase for our certified staff. That step increase for the majority of our employees equates to about 1.5%. For most of us, there are a couple that we have gaps where not everyone gets one, but it's a 2% salary increase and a step increase. And then very excited about the $15 starting pay for classified staff. Those are for classified staff in GP, and Mary Ellen and Penny are working through to make sure that we don't have compression there, that when we move people up, our existing employees will move up staggered as well. And engaged in community, we're going to continue to sustain the funding levels that are currently in the 22 budget. And then from effective and efficient operations, here are the positions, the 1 bus and video coordinator position. And I'll point out that's already funded in ESSER. The real need for that is over the course, I think, the last 4 years, we've gone from something like 58 contract bus routes to I think it's 95 or 96, and we haven't added positions to support those contract drivers, and so that's a position that we've supported in ESSER and asking to be funded in GP. The other, I mentioned the athletics. We have a grant specialist that's a request in there, and then also a data analysis specialist. And then, of course, in effective and efficient operations, we have some contractual agreements with custodial and first student that we'll have to continue to honor. Again, key takeaways for this budget is that we are investing in people. We think it's important that we invest in our employees to not only show appreciation, but also to provide living wages to employees that we've focused on the last several years to get to that goal of $15 per hour. Obviously, investment in our priorities, trying to be very strategic about the different funding sources of what we currently have, what we know is going away, and then what is possibly coming our way next year. And so strategically aligning those investments to our priorities, and most importantly, at this point is it's a balanced budget, so there will be no additional requests from county government beyond what's here. Any questions from board members?
Board members, you have your new fancy thing in front of you. Press the green or the button under the green to talk or to show up on my thing. Press the red when you talk, and then when you're done, just press the clear button, and it will go off my thing. First, we have Ms. Thurman.
Yes. So I got to be the first person to push the button. That was exciting. And I did it right. This is great. You know how I hate percent raises.
Yes, ma'am.
A very wise man told me the way to do this was to give percent raises for 2 or 3 years and then figure out how much 2% raise was for our top paid teacher. Find out what that amount is, and then give that amount across the board to everyone to keep from widening the gap, because that's what we continue to do. Ever since I've been on the board, I've just seen it happen time and time and time again. That's how we get the worker bees being so upside down, and I know we're trying to write that up now, but that's, I still don't think, sufficient enough. How much do you think that would, of course, some of the higher paid people probably won't like that, but I think it would really help, because, you know, I'm even hearing now that we're having a hard time getting umpires for ball games. We're not paying enough to even get, our kids are not getting to play ball. I think I got 3 notices today, 3 games that had been canceled because they couldn't get umpires. So that's something else we're going to have to look at. But the thing is, if we can't if we can't pay the people that really keep the school running more money and make it more attractive, I think we're going to continue to have more and more trouble. But does that make sense to you, Mary Ellen? Is doing something like that? Like I say, find out the highest paid teacher, so that way the teachers are not being punished in any way. Just find out what that amount, 2% of her salary or his salary would be, and then give that amount to everyone across the board to bring everybody up the same amount, instead of making the people who are making the most money higher, and then they get up this much and the other people get up this much. So
I think there's some misconception on how our administrators are paid. So our administrators are paid based off the teacher's salary. So in effect, and we can do some analysis of this to provide it, but if you think about it, say a teacher that's at $50,000, the administrator is paid a multiplier. So I think that our high school principals, the multiplier is 1.63. So they get $50,000 times 1.63, right? If we bumped it up $2,000 or 2%, in effect, they're not getting overall all on their big salary. They get the 2% on the teacher base, and then the multiplier from there. I hear what you're saying. This is what I struggle with, just to be completely honest. To get talent, you have to pay talent. And we find it very difficult anytime a director, community superintendent, a difficult principal job, any of those positions, we find it very difficult to attract really good talent. And honestly, you're finding it at times difficult for people being willing to step up into those jobs. And so I think we've got to continue to look at our employees that are in jobs that we historically have not paid well, and continue to move those up. Our classified employees, and to be transparent, we've still got some work in school nutrition and SACC that isn't reflected in here, that we'll talk about with our self-funded budgets. So we know we've got work to do there, but what I don't want to get into, and obviously it's the pleasure of the board and we'll talk about it, but what I don't want to get into is us creating a situation where we're not being competitive with our administrators, so that we can attract and retain really good talent there.
well, I understand, but no offense to anyone, but we can run a school a whole lot better without administrators than we can teachers, just saying.
True.
But anyway, this $15 an hour, okay, I think I talked to, I guess it was Penny the last time, about this $15 an hour. That's $15 an hour spread out over 12 months, so that's really not really $15 an hour. I mean, for the time that they work. I mean, I understand how
It's
they're paid
$15
because it's on a
depending on their contract.
12-month schedule. Because I know some people now are making, like the people now that are making, say, $17 an hour, are they getting any raise, the ones that are working in the schools now? Since you're starting these out at 50, the new hires on 15?
Well, that's what the compression, so it's the 15 to pull the lowest up and then looking at, those.
So they will be stepped up as well from there.
That's what we learned last time is when we bumped up to, I think the last one was 13
Right.
or 13.50. It's a mistake. We didn't
Right.
think about what it did to the employees that are sitting at 7.15. And so now we budgeted for that increase up the ladder. to
Yeah,
ensure
I knew that was a problem
we're-
last time, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't doing the same thing again. Because some people got caught up in that, people that have been there for years, we were hiring people on making as much money as they were, and they had been there for a while. Okay. Okay, that's all for now.
Ms. Robinson.
Sure. Okay, I've got several questions, just kind of like curious for my own knowledge. On page 8, we talk about clarity and transparency. I'm just curious, are we thinking about a different way for this to show up on our website and how the public engages in our budget? We've done a really good job, I think, for the last few years having the budget on the website, but just the way that I was reading this section, I just wondered, did you have new thoughts on how we're, how the public is viewing this information?
I don't necessarily think viewing it. I think that the open HCS page has done a good job. I think we need to advertise that a little bit better.
Yeah,
'cause
probably
we still
so.
get people asking
Yeah.
like, where's the budget? Well,
Right.
it's on the website.
Yeah.
But what we are talking about is, again, if you look on page 10 or 11, that one that shows the different types of positions, is trying to be very clear about what those positions are, so that when we say, a school-based support, that we're not putting someone there that actually is doing more district-level work. Does that make sense? And the thing that I always go back to is we point out, 94% of our staff, or of our budget is school-based, right, or of our staff, I got that wrong, is to make sure that we can clearly show that, and make sure that we're clear about, okay, what is in student support, right? What are the positions that are there? And are those positions, what schools are they at, and can we clearly show what schools they're at? Because right now, the way that we don't have the capability with the old system, but Munis does, is that we should be able to go to Mary Ellen and say, this chair that has this person in it, where is it and where did it come from, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the clarity and
That's all.
transparency.
I mean, I really like how you're
transparency.
basically cost segregating your staff. Like it's great. I really like that. That's great. Okay, that's helpful. And I think you're right. I think if you can pinpoint or show the public like, hey, these 25 positions are allocated to these schools, it goes a long way. So the question about the $15 per an hour, I'm assuming that would apply to our nutrition staff. It won't. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am.
So I'd like to talk about that for a moment. I had the wonderful pleasure of doing cafeteria duty 2 Fridays ago at CSAS, and they put me on food prep. I had no idea what I was walking into. I prepped food for a few hours. I also served food for a few hours, and I thought I was actually going to be like lunchroom monitoring, like yelling at kids, and that's not what they needed me for. So I was in for a big surprise. I even called my mom, who's in town. She came down and volunteered. So I think we're all pretty aware of just the staff shortage. And Kritz and I were also talking about this that same day because we saw each other at an event at Orchard Knob Middle School. And no doubt that all of our staff needs to see an increase. But I read in here that we're paying our school nutrition staff $12 an hour.
So
Is that right?
it is, but when we come to the self-funded programs, we're
Okay.
bringing a proposed budget in
Okay.
school nutrition to move it to a starting salary of $13 an hour.
Okay.
And to be honest, we can be aggressive in it, but there's some
Okay.
liability that comes along with it. And so
Yeah.
if we want to have that conversation, Mary Ellen's just gonna have to walk us through what the options are.
Yeah.
In terms of, and there is a scenario that if we get really aggressive and school nutrition can't cover it, that fund balance could cover,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
we're open to the conversation. The $13 an hour, we're actually pressing Kristen saying, we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about it, we'll take care. But if we want to talk about $14 an hour, we just want to be able to show you the numbers of what it actually could mean.
Yeah. I'm under the impression that we've just got so many vacancies and that part of our business that, I mean, it's just so competitive. I mean, like restaurants are paying like $18, $19 an hour. So anyways, you guys are aware of that. One thought that I had was, we met a number of nutrition vendors at the conference last year, and I certainly don't want to suggest anything that's going to make anyone scared for their job, because I'm under the impression that these vendors would work with our current staff, but maybe they have the ability to make the numbers look different. I just wonder if it would be worth our while to explore one of the nutrition vendors that are out there. We may even see a revenue increase even on the lunch side as well and breakfast side as well. I don't know. That'd be something.
We met with a couple of those in the fall, and
Okay.
the timing was just
Okay.
where we were as a district. It was more like, let's pause and when we
Okay.
get through this transition.
Okay.
And we need to bring Robert up to speed in
Okay.
that conversation. But we are exploring what options are, and again, we're committed. I 100% agree with you.
Absolutely.
Like, we need to get school nutrition and SACC up
Yeah.
to $15 an hour. Right now, we're doing what we can, but we can definitely get more aggressive. I just want y'all to understand what it could mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that we're exploring that. I think I just had no clue how hard that job is, and also the SACC job. Like, you couldn't pay me enough money to do that. No way. I wouldn't watch those kids. And my kids attend that program, so I can say that. On page 11, I was curious about okay, so the step increase is equal to, is it a certain percentage? Can you remind me?
It's not. It averages out.
It's just
for
like
the
from-
majority,
okay.
but it's about 1.5%. But
Okay.
again, there are places where 1 year, like, you may not get a step that year. If you've
Yeah.
been here 19 years and you're going to 20, there might not be a step right there.
Okay. But then the 2% increase kind of makes up for that. So everybody's getting a bump no matter what. Some people are getting a bigger bump than others. When we were talking about the proposed bonus that Chairman brought up, we also brought up like the idea of something a little bit different or bigger than this 2%. Like, are you guys thinking about this any different, or are we pretty committed to the 2% salary increase?
So with our projected revenue, it's pretty aggressive. I mean,
Okay.
the way we're covering it is anticipating, I mean, that's what the vacancy savings, you look at that number, it basically covers the 2% and the step.
Okay. So I calculated 1.95% for the vacancy savings, but I think you're saying that it's really normally like about a 3%. Are you including the GP position salary cleanup as part of that 3%? No? Okay. Okay, I just need to better understand those numbers. I would love to know, I don't want to hog the floor, so I'll let somebody else go, but I would love offline to at least understand page 13, which schools these positions are going to, and happy to talk about that offline so I don't take up the floor. Thanks.
Mr. Smith.
Just a couple of things. Thank y'all. Justin, you, on page 13, when we talked about the new GP-funded positions, and you mentioned splitting that job, the athletic director and the discipline. Boy, I think that's wise. I'm glad that you're doing that. But related to that, in our budget, is there a stipend or a pay for athletic directors across the district?
So we're looking at that. I'm not sure when, that wouldn't be in this conversation.
No, it's not been in there.
Do what?
It's something we haven't done before.
Yeah, but I'm saying, when we come later, it's in a different part of the budget discussion. Yep.
I'm not sure, I don't think I've been in that conversation yet, so.
So obviously, we need to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
We
sorry.
did have discussions about looking at a school-level athletic director stipend.
Well, we've talked about this before, and certainly one of my priorities. And, those guys, they unlock the door and then they turn out the lights and they don't get anything. But we're paying coaches, and so I really hope that you'll find a place to fund that someplace. So that's certainly, I mean, we've been talking about it for a long time. The other question I had, and I know y'all get tired of hearing this, but we're fully funded to get the buses moved, and anything in there that I can anticipate there's not going to be any delay, and all that's going to take place, and it's
I
funded.
mean, the only delay would be if there's, an issue with
Weather,
getting,
yeah.
But I mean, the funding, you guys already approved the funding
Okay.
that's sitting there. And
Okay, all right, okay, great, thank you. Like, one other thing, and Tiffany kind of touched on it, and I think I've heard the number before, but I want to hear it again. We did talk about something, a few weeks ago about this one-time bonus, and then we decided not to do that, and then we had some discussion, well, maybe when it comes time to look at compensation increase, maybe we could do more than the 2%. What does 1% cost us?
it's about 2.9 million.
Okay, so then it would be safe to assume then 0.5% would cost us half of that. Okay. I hope we'll look at that because, we had this conversation a few weeks ago when Chairman McClendon suggested that maybe we do this one-time bonus, and candidly, all the teachers that I talked to said, don't do a one-time bonus. We'd rather see that reflected in a compensation increase. So I know every dollar is important, but I'd like to see us not forget that we listened to those guys and we didn't do the bonus, and maybe we could do another 0.5% or 1% for our teachers. Just thought.
I think one thing I want to just point out that we talk a lot about is just a reminder that over the last 4 years, since 2017, we've increased 10%, and since 2013, 17% in certificated salaries. So I just think it's always important. We're always looking to raise that number. We're always looking to be competitive. But I also think it's also notable that over the last 9 years, 17% increase in salaries is certainly, that's a huge feat for a board to continue to commit to.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry,
I'm done for now.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out and reminding us of that. Have we also assumed some healthcare benefits as well? Like, is there a number that you can attach to that that would be helpful for us to hear?
Because we have kept the charge to employees the same, so that all the increases that we've experienced have been absorbed through the general purpose budget.
Is there
and
anything
funding.
else like that you think is worth mentioning as far as like a number goes on compensation?
It's 10. Well, it's probably more than that, but 10,000 is what we fund to GP, and of course there's totally differences. Plus, we added the short-term disability. I think it was 3 years ago that we added.
I think Penny's done an analysis too about, on average, how much money is being saved monthly by those who are using it regularly. And that can certainly be something we pull into the budget meetings, because there is a real concrete number in terms of dollars being saved.
Yeah, you guys are looking at it the same way, but like in the private sector, the way we look at it is like, how much does that employee cost us, right? Like, and I think for the board to better understand that is really helpful as well. So maybe pulling together numbers for, the different tiers of employees. It's all relative as we're talking through our budget and how we hopefully can give our employees the best of what we've got. So.
Mr. Prez.
Thank you. Can you, when I look at page 10, obviously this is a budget of revenues. Just off the top of your head, if you have it there, if you've got a data point there, and I'll look through the big budget to get this too, but what is the percentage of expense on employees directly? Do you know that? Like just employees, and not other expenses? I mean, if you know off the top of your head. if not. 78%. Where? Okay.
Yeah, it's actually,
Oh, sorry, it was
there.
there.
That Marcus, because it's somewhere in here.
Okay, so you're saying I should have paid attention?
Yeah, it's on page 13. It's on page 13.
Perfect. So in page, let me see here, page 11, I say this often, I think language matters. So vacancy savings, the word savings is positive, the word vacancy to me is not. Because either we don't need the position, in which case we shouldn't have them, or we are asking other people to take on roles and responsibilities that aren't theirs. So to me, that's not a positive saving, that's actually a very negative saving. Again, to me, language matters. So I would suggest that we pick something that reflects that, because that means we're, and to a lot of the comments we're saying, either we're unable to hire people, and we need to know that, and we need to know why we're not able to hire people. But right there, when I look at that, I think, the best way to save money is just not hire people. And we would hurt a lot. So, and then, this isn't for the budget. I think down the road, like, we're gonna work through the budget and whatever, we always talk about what a fully funded program would be. And in that, we include a lot of things that we currently don't do or have or wish. But hearing all the conversation about salaries, all that aside, I would just like to know if we had the ideal of salaries across, with the current staff and the current proposal and the current everything across the board, and we actually were able to say, here we remain competitive, here we are able to serve our staff well, we are so much short in order to do that. And as we're talking budgets, and as we're talking state level budgets, and as one day we need to address this with our community, and the reason, as Ms. Thurman and everyone's pointed out, we can't hire. I mean, there's a lot of positions right now that we can't, at what we're paying, $13 an hour, which we're bumping it up to $13 an hour, and everybody said it. Good luck, hiring people at $13 an hour. And so the truth is, there's some positions that we need to raise, and I know we don't have that money. I know we're gonna have a balanced budget. I know but it'd be really important to say, you know what? To treat our current staff well, this is what it would cost us. And well, to me, I always say I don't believe in paying generously, but I do believe in paying fairly. And so this is what it means to pay fairly. And then finally, healthcare, you mentioned, Tiffany, let me ask it this way. Which of our employees do not have health care?
Of our employees, everyone except for part-time people.
Okay, so then of not our employees, who's there?
We would have to go back and
Like,
look at the contracts.
Buzz,
with
SSC, okay.
SSC always have access to
Okay.
healthcare. The difference is, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, so of
what that
ours,
is, but-
only part-time employees don't have healthcare benefits. Okay, that's good to hear. You're saying something about,
But that's school nutrition though, right?
No, school nutrition's our employees.
Are
They're
they
self-funded.
full-time employees?
If they are full-time, they would have access to
to
healthcare.
Okay, thank you, because,
Which probably, well, I mean.
but anyway, so healthcare, yeah, that's encouraging to me, because I know healthcare is one of those, unfortunately, it's very expensive to be poor. And so I'm glad that we are also providing that as well. And that's it. I do have a question, same as Tiffany said, about all this movement here, back and forth, and who fits where and what, but I can talk about that. So thank you.
Ms. Hill.
Thank you. First thing is really an idea. You all, was that a sigh because I have an idea?
You what?
You made a huge sigh
Oh,
whenever
I'm
she said
sorry. Ain't about you, it's about me.
You don't have to do anything for this idea, Joe.
It's about moving buses away from districts.
That's
The, the positions, when you guys started talking about like a person that's a district support, meaning that what district support says to me is that they support schools across the district. But it might not mean the same thing to somebody else. And I just had a thought as you guys were talking about what different positions are, that perhaps for the public-facing documents, and really even for our board-facing documents, perhaps we have some kind of checkmark checklist, that's almost like, here's the position, and it spends 40 hours a week spends between 30 and 40 hours a week in a local school, works with children, and then we can see checked off so that then when we get a position request even, that we have a standardized way that not every job's going to check every box, but that when we get that athletic coordinator position for the district, we're going to know, are they with students? Are they at central office all day? And I think that might also get us teed up for future conversations with the legislative body about what is and isn't a teacher. If we are already kind of doing some of that homework here. So nothing urgent, but could be really useful to the public, because every time we add a position, people ask that kind of question. And our jargon isn't the same as the public's jargon, so just a thought.
And this was our first step to that, and I think it's as
Yeah.
we go through it, we can.
Yeah, as
the
we
new
start-
system lets us more see, like, what are they doing, and so trying to kind of.
Yeah.
And we also have a lot more buckets, so we're trying to kind of simplify it and keep.
And, to put it in a designed format that's really easy for the public to understand, and all of us, and it's really useful when we have some reminders, the way that you all continually remind us what we've agreed is our mission and what we've agreed are our strategic values, that if we had those kind of things on a job description in our board packet, that would help remind us this is what we said matters to us. The other thing that occurs to me, you all make our jobs a lot easier when you bring us a balanced budget. But each of my colleagues that has spoken has talked about some kind of additional revenue or additional spending, be it equalizing the value of a job from the most expensive, most highly paid teacher to the most junior staff member making the same pay, which is interesting, to adding $1 million here, or adding what's our big picture best idea for how much we could pay everybody and the world be wonderful. That's easy for us to do on this dais, y'all, but when it's where we're going to put our feet and our meetings and our time if we really get brought that kind of budget. If we really want to see what it looks like to get our 2% of our teachers, our top paid teacher, and pay that to our office worker, and we find out that that's going to cost $3 million, it's $3 million we don't have. It makes me nervous to think that we are paying for a salary rate increase with unfilled positions, because what we know is that's not our system working at its best. Now, I think it's a smart way to do it in the face of a balanced budget, and I think we have some other county organizations that should think similarly. I know the sheriff has, I think, 100 unfunded or unfilled positions and has carried them for years. So use that in your budget, right, to increase your pay for your people. Like that, we're proving you can do that. But just, I guess, for all of us, as we brainstorm here about let's pay people more, people love to hear that. But then if we get the budget where we pay people more, we've got to be the one to go to the Rotary and go to the everywhere and say, hey, this is why we've said we want to pay people more. It matters to us. We're creating a wealth gap. We want to help solve this, and it's going to mean that we need our community to partner with us to fund that kind of thing. The pot is only so big. And frankly, as I see this budget, we're scraping the bottom of it, y'all. When it comes to the fact that we're using one-time money to do a lot of things that feel more and more essential every day. That we're talking about behavioral specialists and parent volunteer coordinators, parent outreach folks that we've put in the nice to have pile. And yet, how many times do we come to a meeting and we say, we need more parent involvement? What's going on at home? Or these kids don't know how to behave. We say that at meetings. We say somebody needs to fix that. And we've put that in the nice to have pile. And what I see when I see a nice to have pile is that sucker's on the chopping block when the money gets tight, right? So just some things for you guys to think about. Thanks for a balanced budget. It does make our life easy, and we can just tell you about all the things we'd love for you to work into it.
Ms. Thurman.
Okay, a couple of questions, or a statement, I guess. I was not insinuating that we needed more money. I didn't know it may come out to be the same amount of money, just allocated a different way. I don't know that it would be any more money. I have no idea, because we've never done it. But is this number from the state, is that final? That's not final.
We have yet to receive. This is
You
taking
still
the
don't- we still
governor's
don't know.
budget and doing my own calculations and estimating. I've talked to some other.
So it
districts.
could be even a little more.
It could be more, especially with our enrollment projections and, so there's a lot.
Okay, so if it's more, then it's possible that we could do a little bit more of a raise, if it's more, correct? Okay, I would like to see that before we put it anywhere else. I hope that we can do that, maybe.
And if you remember, we did 2 or 3 years ago do a mid-year
Right,
full raise,
exactly.
not a bonus. So to your point, if we
Yeah.
did a different projection,
Okay, well, that's good, that's
And
good.
if we could get the projection, the BEP before, you vote, and I think there's actually time before the county's final vote, so there's, some flexibility there that we could.
Okay, also, Justin, I would like to have a flow chart. I saw one the other day that was sent out. I would like for us to have that flow chart of who answers to and who works
Oh,
for
we're-
who
yeah,
and stuff.
we're
If you
working
can,
on
if you can get that as well to the board, that would be great. Also, the free lunch and breakfast that we have, is that going to continue?
I would need to clarify with Kristen Noss. My understanding is it's only guaranteed through the end of this year.
Right.
This school year, so it would end June, and then August would go back to where it was before.
Okay, well, we need to know that so we can make parents aware if that's what it's going to be. And also, I think that's one reason that we get a lot of complaints about the lunches, and that's what happens when you let the government feed your children. You need to be feeding them yourself. But anyway, I think that's something we need to be made aware of as well, what we're going to do about that, so parents can be aware if they're going to have to start coming up with lunch money. We need to give them plenty of notice for that as well. Let's see. Also, I just put on here, assistant principals are for discipline. That's why all schools have assistant principals. So behavior specialist is one thing, but assistant principals are actually supposed to be in charge of discipline. So, and looks like all the schools are going to be getting one, so that's good. And also, when is the janitorial service? I know we just approved a new one last year. It says improved janitorial services here, which made me kind of wonder when is the expiration date on the current contract?
I believe it's May 2025.
It's not till 2025.
We just approved it.
Yeah, I
they
started
just
to say it was last year, I
June
think.
1st of 21. I think it was 4 years. So I think it's May 30th of 2025.
Okay, and we have an opt-out clause, I know, we always do.
We got an opt-out clause in anything. They're experiencing the same thing that
Yeah,
First
getting help.
Student is experiencing. I mean, the reason we've upped our contracted bus routes is because First Student's having a hard time finding bus drivers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I understand that completely and totally. But one thing also, when we were talking about doing a bonus, we talked about giving it to all employees, whether they were contract employees, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. And then in this raise,
Well, remember, they have an escalator. All of them have an
Yeah.
escalator.
In their salaries every year, it bumps up.
Regardless, so we don't
Yeah.
have to negotiate with contracted bus drivers, with First Student,
Yeah.
with SSC, because there's
Yeah.
what do you call that? It's a C of I.
Yeah, escalator of some kind.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know that, but I was hoping that would, I started to say, I hate to just, okay, but anyway. All right, thanks.
Ms. Jones?
Everybody pretty much asked all of my questions, but I got some that I'll ask one-on-one. I did want to, I'll go ahead and say what they are in case y'all just want to go ahead and kind of get that going since a lot of people said it, but I did want some clarity on this right here, on the positions and the funding, where they're actually going to go. And then if they're transferring from GP to relief, what are we going to do when the relief is done? Like, how are we going to sustain that? Also, I really would like to know more about the early childhood education piece and the school safety grant. Like, what is that going to be used for? Is that being used for cameras? Is that being used for bullying? Is that being, or unsafe school halls? Is that being used for safer school environments? Like, what does that look like? People or items or that kind of thing. Also, I guess my question was, I know in my schools that I represent, my high schools that have athletic directors, they're also coaches. So I'm a little confused on people that are athletic directors that don't get paid, because like at Brainerd, LeVar Brown coaches basketball and he is the athletic director.
So the good example there is LeVar. If you go Friday night at Brainerd, LeVar is almost at every home football game doing administrative
Right.
duty, and he doesn't get paid.
Right, I mean, he just gets his coaching, but he is athletic director. So you're right, I mean, he's at the other sports
So
too,
what Mr. Smith is asking is the athletic director, since there are additional responsibilities outside of either their responsibilities as a teacher or the basketball coaches, that they should get a stipend
Enhanced.
to be that
Okay.
athletic director.
Okay, I just want to make sure that somebody just ain't someone being an athletic director, because a coach could do that. Also, about the food. So, I don't know. I know food is not the same. When I loved school lunch, I looked forward to it. I can still tell you, Miss Allison was our cafeteria. I know everybody that worked in there, and the food was good. It was good. Like, we looked forward to it. The only thing we added to was pizza, and it was ranch, because that was the cool thing to do, right? But we ate our food, breakfast and lunch, and our sack bags when they took us on field trips. The kids do not do that now. We know that. Tiffany is right. When we were in Nashville at TSBA, I had some of the best school food I had in a long time, having been on the board. And it was through a vendor. Like, I mean, it was really good, and it was healthy, and it was nutritious. And the lady was actually talking to us about how a lot of programs that went over to their service were self-funded, but how the revenue increased because the food was good. So then kids went, like, and they talked about how people that worked around the school sometimes would go get food from the school. I mean, it was really good. Like, I went back a couple of times. It was really good. And I kept eating the oatmeal, which was odd, but it was like this breakfast oatmeal, but it was really good. But I guess I'm saying all that to say, I am not a proponent of contracting services out, but I do feel like if we're not able to do that, and they are, and the food is good, and the people are able to get what they need, our employees are able to get what they need, and the kids are able to get what they need, and we're able to make some money, I guess I would like to just explore that. Simply because I do know that school nutrition, if they're full-time, they do get insurance, right? But let's just be honest, we know what they make. The social worker in me knows that most people that make that amount of money are not electing benefits. Because if they elect benefits, they're coming home with like $3 and $4 an hour. So I think I'm kind of concerned about, I'm not saying you all aren't trying to do anything. I just think that our hands are tied unless we do ask for something, or we do cut something else out, like Rhonda said, or something. So I would just like for us to explore what that looks like. Might not change anything, because Tiffany's also right. Restaurants are paying $18 and $19 an hour and offering free money for school and everything, and uniforms and everything, and it's still hard to get people. So I'm not saying that's going to change what we're dealing with, but I like to explore those things the same way I did with us bringing buses back into Hamilton County. I just want to explore and see what that looks like. So that is a big thing for me, and especially if it's real good, because then I can go eat at my school down the street. Second to that, I know we're going to talk about the self-funding. We're going to talk about those at a separate time. And so those will be school-age child care and school nutrition. school nutrition only, right?
Well, there'll be other parts of the budget in that conversation. Those two will be.
Yeah, I think we highlighted the high level at the last meeting, and they're in this book too.
Okay.
They're in here.
And then, lastly, when we talk about over here under great teachers and leaders, and we talk about adding the employee, the 6 school-based administrative positions, the 2% salary increase, which we've talked about all of that, the starting wage. I think my concern is there anything being budgeted, or how are we looking to address morale? Because I can tell you 2 of my high schools are down some people, and we ain't even made it to May. That is concerning for me. And I didn't know that. I started, the streets talk. I say that all the time. The streets talk. The streets got to talking yesterday. And I realized some people was missing some places. And so I'm just concerned because I do feel like in those 2 buildings, and I'm only speaking for District 5, but I do feel like in those 2 buildings, no matter what's happened, they've been pretty good at retaining staff. Especially one of them has been really good at staff retention. And so I just am really concerned about what that looks like for all the hard work that has been done. I honestly can say for the past 6 to 8 years that I've been here. I'm just really concerned about that. And once again, we know education is not something people are running to, but I just think, I don't know, that just really bothered me yesterday when I heard that the amount of people. I was like, wait, what? And you and I had a conversation about one school, but then I heard about another school yesterday. So I was just like, oh, that's just really been weighing on me, because I don't want to see that happen. And I would be curious, and Penny's not here, but I would really be curious as to why. And I'm sure it's probably a gamut of things from COVID to, people transition, life change, whatever. But I would just be really curious as to what they're saying on their exit interviews. And then whatever that is, if that's something that we as a board can support you all in addressing so that we don't have that experience.
So a couple of questions on my end. I'll piggyback off of the school nutrition. And Dr. Robertson, when he was operations, we kind of, like he said, got a little bit down the road talking to a vendor. And there's actually a little wide range. They can come in and assist where our employees still stay our employees, but they bring in the purchasing power, the chefs, that kind of stuff, or there's the full type of thing. And I mean, I think every contract or every account they have seen some kind of revenue increase when they're brought in for self-funded programs.
And they
because
were connected to SSC.
SSC, it's the same parent company.
Chartwell's.
Chartwell's. That's the only one, and that's the food that we tasted. And I believe it's no cost to the district because it's built into the food price. So it's something that the board just has to agree to. They come in, and so they only get paid if more kids eat lunch at our building. So it's a very attractive thing from a board standpoint. But our employees don't have to, if it's the pleasure of the board, our employees don't have to go and get rehired by another company. They stay all in-house. We run everything. They just come in with their expertise and do it. So it's of course, the last 10 months in the school system have been full of changes and stuff, but and Dr. Robertson, to his credit, we had conversations about this well into early last year, but it's a place that we really need to innovate as a district and get our kids eating lunches in our schools, breakfast, lunch, and they can even do dinner programs for our schools and stuff like that. My second, another thing to piggyback off of is thank you for the athletic position. I think that's critically important. And then I think the athletic director position, that our stipend that Mr. Smith brought up is really important. We have teachers. A lot of ADs in your high schools and stuff are principals, assistant principals that are making a great living. Our middle schools, a lot of them are teachers that are coaches and also the athletic director. And so if you're a basketball coach, you coach, during the winter, but you're also doing football games, and now you're doing track and baseball. It's a whole year worth of stuff, and you're only getting paid for your coaching. So I think your middle schools also need to be included that along with your high schools. Kind of my third one, and it really, and I don't know if it's the right place to do it, but we really need to start planning ahead on how do we fund and keep our pay plan, our differentiated pay plan funded. Those are conversations that I really kind of wish we were having now. It's one of the best things I think we've done, and a really innovative and approach. And well, it's not really innovative because we're paying more for harder to staff areas, which is a great practice because it yields results. And this will be kind of our first full year of it, right? So I'll be really interested to see if we get that data from HR to say, what is our retention from that and how well does that work? But it's like an $8-9 million kind of investment from this board. And that's something that we have to start planning to absorb in the next couple of years. And I know we could take small steps now to make the larger leap. So that's something that I would like us to see. I mean, it's kind of, you can only slice the pie so many ways. And so, I mean, I completely understand that, but that's kind of another point. I had one more thing, but I lost my note on that. But yeah, those are my big three. As we kind of move forward, I think we're doing a good job, and I appreciate y'all. Mr. Smith.
Question and a comment. My question is, kind of piggyback what Jeannie said about where we've moved the parent volunteer coordinators, behavior specialists from GP to relief funds. When does that run out? When does those relief funds go away?
Fiscal year '24,
So we still got a couple of years.
this year and next year.
It's okay. You know, the reason I ask that, these behavior specialists and parent coordinators too are critical, I think. And I mean, student behavior, student conduct is something we got to deal with. And I mean, it's just, it's scary. And at some point, we got to deal with it somehow. Seemed like we hadn't spent enough energy in that area, so I do have a concern, like a couple of other you did, about that maybe going away. Dr. Robertson, the note down here that says that 78% of our budget is human resources. How does that compare with other districts our size across the country?
I don't have exact figures. It's pretty comparable. I mean, when you think about just the cost of salaries and the cost of benefits, I mean, to the point of, you know, we're paying $10,000 per employee for health insurance, pay, what, 5% or 3% into retirement? 5% into retirement. So, I mean, you can see that the cost of benefits is expensive. So, I don't have the exact number. We can look at the other class school systems in Tennessee and get a comparison, but it's
probably
about the same.
Yeah, I've talked to Knoxville, and it's
Yeah.
very similar.
Yeah. And just one other thing, not a question, but a comment. I get calls all the time from teachers and other staff and about staffing issues, and I always say, listen, you need to talk to your principal. That's not my job as a school board member. And then a lot of times I'll hear, well, I'm afraid to talk, you know. And I don't know what we got to do to fix that culture where students or staff are afraid to really speak their mind for fear of repercussions. I don't know how you fix that, but I'd like to see us fix that, whatever that would take. And I'm hearing a lot now from teachers about the staffing model, and they don't understand it. And I'm confident probably the principals do, and you probably spend a lot of energy there in training them because they're having to make adjustments, and it's overdue. It's something we've got to address and should have a long time ago. But I think it would help if somehow that was communicated exactly how that works and why it's necessary to maybe the teachers, because I'm not sure that's taking place on the school level. I think the principal understands, but I'm not so sure that the teachers and other folks understand. So I'm getting a lot of calls about that, frustration around cuts being made here and adjustments being made here. And, well, have you talked to your principal? No, I'm afraid to. And, you know, so Well, that's not my job. I'm a school board member. That's not my job to deal with that. So anyway, maybe through just some effort you can make to communicate clearly to teachers how and why those changes are taking place, because we've been talking about it for a long time, and it change is hard for everybody.
I think it's a good point about us communicate, like looking at some communications to teachers. That's probably a miss on our part. We've tried to communicate extensively with administrators, but we will look at a way to communicate with teachers. I think at a high level, we have been stepping into this for a number of years, but we also hit a thing called COVID 2 years ago, and right about the time where we were staffing and schools that were supposed to lose positions, we held them harmless, and we added positions to people that were supposed to get them. And then, you know, about the time last year when we should have been doing the same thing, Delta's coming along, and we did it. So we've gone through 2 cycles of staffing where we really we're trying to make the right decisions for schools based on where we were in the pandemic, and now we're at a place where, so I tell people, we want to give as big of a raise as we can, but when 78% of our budget is people, and then another large chunk of it is mandatory costs like cleaning, transportation, all these other things that we have to do, really the only wiggle room we have is in people. And I want to be clear, we're right-sizing staffing. We're not cutting positions and we're right-sizing staffing, meaning we're getting staff where we've all agreed as a board that we should be at this student-teacher ratio, right? And so we're not cutting. I was here in 2008 when it was cut to the bone, and Ms. Thurman probably remembers those difficult conversations. We're not cut, we're right-sizing. We're trying to get people back to where we really should be. And again, from what we think is a fiscal responsibility issue and a transparency issue, is now moving forward. Everybody knows you go up in enrollment, you're going to get positions. You go down in enrollment, that's when you lose positions. Really, the main 3 drivers of this is going to be enrollment, it's going to be poverty level, and then it's going to be your grade band, right? So we're staffing elementary heftier than we would staff high school. But we do need to communicate, I hear you, with teachers better.
Ms. Hill?
Thank you. Couple of thoughts just to add as this conversation has gone on. I appreciate everybody's input. As we talk about stipends, I just want to raise a reminder that we have a lot of other staff members that put a lot of time in beyond sports, and we've done some good work in that space. And since I've been on this board, we've moved forward with some stipends for our fine arts teachers. But our nerd sports that Marco's daughters and my daughter participate in, where you go and make fake governments, youth in government, model UN, mock trial, all of those are intensely time consuming. And these kind of sports don't stop when the lights go down. So we've got my daughter's youth in government sponsor just spent 4 days in Nashville with her team, and Lookout Valley had somebody there as well. We've got kids doing that kind of thing at CCA. We've got robotics teams, and those kids will burn the midnight oil, and those teachers are there with them. In addition, I know that her teacher has spent Friday after Friday after Friday doing fundraisers. They're at a K-12 school, and they do movie nights and babysit for kids like Tiffany's kids. So the mom and dad go out, and there's Miss Davis yet again, spending her Friday night until 9 o'clock at school. So when we think about stipends, we need to remember our club sponsors as well. And then one final thing, Justin and I have talked about this related to the staffing model, where we're seeing some friction, and it's work that we as a board need to pick up. It relates to our specialty programs. And I think that it would be useful in the coming months for us to really wrestle with what is our commitment to our specialty programs, whether that's a Future Ready Institute, the art programming at the Center for Creative Arts, our magnet schools. We've got them all over, our technical programs. Those rightfully require different resources than our standard zoned schools and our standard programs. And when we talk about fidelity as a board, we need programs that operate with fidelity and integrity. You need to know that you're going to get what you signed up for, and it's going to be that same way next year too. And I know I'm feeling in my schools, which happen to have a lot of specialty programs, a real squeeze, because when we talk about what a high school staffing model is, for example, or a middle school staffing model, we have not had space in the staffing model to make as much room as we need to, I think, for our related arts teachers and other specialty educators. So, and I think that it would probably be very useful for our team, Dr. Robertson specifically, to know from this board where our values are in those programs. If we decide as a body that magnet schools matter to us and that kind of specialty programming matters to us as a board, then I think they would have better marching orders. If we say Future Ready is something we want to do well and at scale, then they'll know that we'll stand behind them as they make those calls. So something to think about, Chairman. Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
Ms. Thurman.
Justin, Teach for America. What amount do we pay them? When does that contract expire?
I know the current contract expires at the end of next school year. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
It's $250,000, and that comes out of federally funded grants around staffing, but yeah.
Okay, how many teachers have they hired, do you know, directly from Teach for America?
Over the course of the 3 years,
Well, just a year, let's just say last year, how many they hired?
They're supposed to get 15. I don't know how many they have currently.
Yeah.
Like 4 next year.
yeah, we're not at 15 for next year. The contract was for 15 1 year. The second year we had 17 actually, so it's 15 plus
okay.
or minus 2.
Okay, what about the sub-finder, ESS? I know that we continually have a problem with that, mainly for the pay, I'm sure. But I guess I'm just wondering, we did this in-house for so long, and we do have extra people in the central office that do nothing but go out and try to hire teachers. We hired people to go out and hire teachers, and yet we're still paying Teach for America to do the same thing that people in the central office are doing. And I'm just wondering, is there a need for these extra people to do that? And I know the sub-finder, are they fulfilling the job like we think they should? And I know it's the hiring thing, but if they can't hire them and we can't hire them, what's the difference in paying them not to be able to find them and us not to be able to find them?
So I would speak to that in 2 separate questions. The ESS, I know that Penny, and if Penny were here, she could speak more intelligently about it than I could. There is a RFP that is ready to go out for it. We have not pulled the trigger, just trying to look at where we are in the budget. If you ask Penny, Penny has not been completely satisfied with work that ESS has done, so we are looking at options there. In terms of recruitment, I think a lot of the comments that we've made tonight have pointed to the need to get as many teachers as possible, as whether you're talking about teacher morale, teacher pay, positions we value, and the number of teachers that are moving away from the position. What Penny and her team, I think, have done well over the last few years is to have a multi-pronged approach to recruitment, whether that's, the recruiters that are going out and getting teachers, whether it's the external pipelines like TFA or Project Inspire, whether it's our new internal pipeline, Grow Your Own. I don't know overall as a district. I was at the Partnership Network meeting last week, which they're going to have some recommendations coming to us around some of this, but for the first time in the 3 years, and I would say maybe in the first time in the history of Hamilton County schools, those partnership schools started the year out staffed 100%, meaning they did not have a vacant position, and they never at any point got below 95%, which is amazing. And that is credit to the partnership network and this board, but I think it's also credit to HR and what they're doing in terms of trying to look at recruiting differently. The days of like we were talking to a magnet school the other day that would post a job 5 or 6 years ago and within a day would get 90 applicants and they have 13, which for some schools people are like 13, that's amazing, you know, but it's showing like it's just a different day. We can't just post a job and they're going to come. We've got to be more active. So I hear what you're saying. I would respectfully press back on you. that we
Well, no,
do-
I'm just wondering if they're doing the job. Like I know that in the past few years, we have hired additional people in HR to do recruiting, and I'm thinking, are they doing the same thing, or is, Teach for America doing any more than we could do here and some of the people that we've hired? Just a question. And also about the discipline committee, I did have a meeting. I was going to set a meeting for the 19th. I think that's the night of the honors banquet, so we had
So
to refigure that. But I am going to have one, Joe. We are going to have a discipline committee meeting.
And when we get that set, we'll want to come back because we've been having some internal talks about some steps that we need to take between now and the start of next school year. Putting together a task force to discuss some of the issues and see how we can better address them. We're very aware that we've got to do a better job, not only proactively, but also responding. And so we would be great to have a meeting and be able to present some of that.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all so much, and with that, we'll adjourn.